Hey there, I'm Chris Benetti, host of the Smart Author podcast. In this episode, I speak with Andrew Kap, and we discuss the tactics you can use to sell 100,000 copies or more of your book. Some of the main topics we will be covering today include how Andrew learned copywriting and how he used it to write the most engaging book someone can read, Andrew's strategies for selling more books, and what led him to writing a bestseller in an already crowded book niche. At the end of this episode, please make sure you visit our website where you can find the show notes plus all the links mentioned with Andrew. If you're enjoying this episode, please make sure you subscribe so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. And if you're struggling with book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit and a clear plan to get your book sales back on track. Now, let's head over to this awesome interview. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm joined by the awesome Andrew Kap. Andrew, how are you?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks so much for having me, man. Really excited for where we're going to take today's conversation.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. And Andrew Kap was actually a recommendation by the wonderful Michelle Cunningham, who is also going to be on the show. And she was basically like, I'm not really a book marketer, but this Andrew Kap guy has just been like dominating his industry and his book sales for forever, as far as I can tell. And that's absolutely just someone you have to have on the show. And of course, she connected us and we're able to make it work. And so, with that, I'd love to know, Andrew, how did you get into writing the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read? And how did you get into the author space in general?
Wow. Usually when I answer this question, it's like I give my law of attraction origin story because it's so pivotal. And I don't even know how necessary that is to this kind of conversation. I'll give a weird version of this. Law of attraction, some people believe in it, some people don't. That's your prerogative. For me, I've had experiences in life where there's been evidence that, hey, there might be something to this. I kind of learned a few things the hard way. But after I learned things the hard way, and I had this real moment of realization where it's like, okay, this is how it works. I actually waited like 11 years before deciding to write the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read. And it was basically a thing where, I'd been a marketing consultant before then. I had been a copywriter before then. I'd done 9 to 5 before then. I'd done all these different things. And I was at a point where in my own business, I wanted to do something that was going to be fun and that was going to be engaging. And to be candid, I'll sound a little bit like a diva on this, but I wanted to have a situation where if a customer reached out to me, I wouldn't be bored and impatient. I'd actually be excited to engage with them. And I thought, well, what can I do here? And like law of attraction was like a real ongoing theme in my life at that point. And I said, you know what? Okay, let me do this. In fact, let me not just do this because anyone that follows that niche or that genre, whatever you want to call it, isn't even like hundreds of books. There's like 1,000 law of attraction books out there. And I'm like, listen, I can't put a book out there just to put a book out there unless I'm saying something new, unless I'm bringing something new and different to the conversation. Otherwise, I'm going to get lost in the shuffle anyway. So part of the challenge was I had to give myself permission to go down a brand new road within that niche. And then I had to deliver on it. And obviously, we've got this really bold promise and book title all in one, the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read. But, I had been, again, copywriter. I'd been in that world to an extent where I just basically refocused those energies and those talents or skills, whatever you want to call it, towards putting out a book that was my goal to just have it be something where people would buy it, they would read it, and literally it would live up to its title. They would never need another law of attraction book again after that. Not sure if that answered your question, but it's a bit of a shallow thing with me because I was always writing anyway. It was more about just making a decision to go down this road and try to make a difference in this way.
The law of attraction book was obviously quite different from being a marketing consultant or a copywriter. Did you basically jump ship and go like all in on the book from there? Or, how did your business change after releasing the book?
Yeah, so it's interesting because here I said like I wanted to do something new in my business where I was engaged, I was happy, I wasn't frustrated. It was very fulfilling for me to put the content out there and the feedback that I got from readers. I actually very intentionally restructured my business to live around this book, around marketing this book, around promoting this book, around engaging with readers of this book. I basically revamped everything and redid it. And if I ever want to go back, I can, but I don't want to right now. It is a very fulfilling situation. But to your point of like, well, it's a different world. The funny thing is, it's a different world in terms of the subject matter or the topic, but it's not a different world for me because part of what I did with the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, with the understanding that I did want this to make a difference, was I took my copywriting skills, I took my copywriting experience, and I wrote the book as a copywriter. It's basically a 208-page sales letter, only it's not selling you on a product, it's selling the reader on themselves and their ability to implement the methods that I teach, along with selling the power and the ability and the magic of the methods themselves. It's a long sales letter, and I wrote it that way because I understood as a copywriter that when you write in that style, there's going to be flow. People are going to glide through the book. There's going to be a level of ease and comfort and enthusiasm and anticipation and excitement. And that to me is a wonderful place to come from if you want your book to do well, because by doing that, the book gets read, it gets reviewed, it gets implemented, it gets recommended, all those magical things, all because I made what seems like, in retrospect, a very obvious decision just to make it fun and enjoyable and convenient and user-friendly and smooth to read through.
And actually, right before this call, I wrote down an additional note here around, because in the 3 words you used to sell 100,000 books, you mentioned that you use copywriting to write both the books. And so I wanted to touch on that. Obviously, you've got a background in copywriting, but where did you learn copywriting? And also like structuring your book? Because obviously, structuring a sales letter is one thing. Structuring a whole book, like, is that a different skill set? Is that a different? Did you just go and review other people who used copywriting to write their book, or was that kind of a new paradigm? Yeah, there's a whole rabbit hole here.
Let me know if I don't answer all the questions within that question there. So I'll say that, well, I'll start with the first part and then please remind me of the last part. It was basically, it's kind of like, if you're an athlete and, you have good lateral movement, you're going to work out your body in a different way if you're going to be a running back versus a power forward, but you're still using your muscles, you're still using your joints. So for me, like a sales letter, oftentimes, people try to make it predictable and they'll have a formula and a layout for how it has to play out. But for me, copywriting isn't just about, make sure you have the headline and make sure you have the guarantee and the call to action. It's about, well, what are things that make the copywriting so effective? Well, being conversational, speaking as if you're speaking to one person versus a group, using small condensed paragraphs rather than long chunky ones that feel cumbersome. So for me, I took all the tools that I understood about copywriting and just utilized them in a new way with the understanding of like, well, I call it a sales letter, but when you read it, it doesn't read like a sales letter. It reads like a book, but it reads like a book with guaranteed flow. To answer, now I remember your first part of the question, I started learning copywriting, I think, it's so hard. Like in 2007, I remember mirroring someone else's their sales letter in a project I was doing, and I did horrible. And the reason that it was so horrible was because the things that I was like copying and modeling, I didn't understand why the sales letter was doing certain things, and therefore, when I tried to apply it in my own way, it fell flat. So it was that early that I was starting to learn, but I really started to learn copywriting probably 2014, 2015, when I actually, started looking into books and started looking into people, learning about John Carlton and reading his book, learning about Gary Halbert, Gary Bensavenga, going down all those different roads, Robert Bly. I'm not sure that some people probably know all those names, and some people are like, well, who are these people? But really just, Ben Settle, reading their books, understanding what they do, why they do it. And all the while, I've always been interested in human psychology. So even before I was learning like copywriting, calling it that, I've always been interested in human psychology for like over 20 years now. So that element is always in the mix when I'm making any kind of decision, whether I'm putting something down on paper or communicating with a customer or a prospect or a reader or on an interview in some other way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and I also think you did a fantastic job, just because I didn't read the books, I listened to the books, but throughout each chapter, there was like that level of like, okay, let's open up intrigue for the next chapter. And so like the listenership, and mind you, I listened to both the books each in their own sitting. So like nonstop. So
Wow.
I didn't need to like have that intrigue of like, okay, how do I continue? But I think it was done fantastically well. And if I was reading it, I definitely would have been like, damn, like I need to find out now what the next thing is. And I think a lot of people can pick up either of the books and take a lot of notes on how they can structure their own book, or potentially think about different ways that they can structure other assets that they're writing for as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's funny. With 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books in particular, it's almost like a meta thing because I'm explaining what I'm doing while I'm doing some of it. Like, there's one point in the book where I explain, like, listen, a really important thing that you don't want to waste the opportunity is putting bonuses in that people can opt in, right? And you got to incentivize people. Well, okay, I said that, but then near the end of the book, I also gave a demonstration of how I do it without actually saying, hey, this is a demonstration. So it's very interesting to kind of be meta where I'm doing all those things and then trying to give people the payoff. There's even one point in the book, I'm hesitant to say this because it's almost like a spoiler and it puts false pressure on me. But, I wrote the last law of attraction book you'll ever read. I don't care about false pressure. There's a point, I think, on page 177 where I mentioned how important it is to help your reader glide through the book. And in the back of my mind, even though I didn't actually say it in the book, it was my hope that people would look down at the page number and be like, whoa, I'm already on page 177. I understand what Andrew's saying here.
Oh, dude. Well, the one meta thing you didn't do was the YouTube channel, though.
Yeah. That's a whole thing. And it's interesting because, and another thing that I said in 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books, I mean, we're all only one person. And while I have a YouTube channel that promotes the law of attraction book, there's right now no concept or no expectation of starting a YouTube channel to support the new one, because it takes too much bandwidth and it'll be impossible for me to pull off, at least to pull off in a way where I feel like I'm giving quality.
Sure. And we don't want to half-ass do anything in life, especially not business, especially when, you're so driven towards giving value in every avenues that you pursue as well. So
yeah, be awesome at, like, if you could be awesome at 3 things, fine. If you can't, do 2. If you can't, do 1. Whatever, make sure you're awesome first and then worry about the number of things you can do, because that's always going to be really the measuring stick for how successful you're going to be, and through that, how happy you're going to be and satisfied with your work you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, I would love to change gears and talk a little bit more about 3 words you use to sell 100,000 books, and some of the tactical advice you give in there, because honestly, it's straight up like just value, tactics. Like there's so many things that people can, get out of the book that they can implement, not only for selling books, but also for selling products and services in their business. Like that, honestly, like, it's seriously a masterclass in everything you can do to consistently give value and show up in your business, whether it applies to books or not. So I'd love to jump into some tactics if you have some to share.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for the compliment, because I did target it towards nonfiction authors whose content shows people how to do something or learn something or achieve something or solve a problem or challenge in their lives. But like you alluded to, it's kind of like it's a sales and marketing book in disguise, no matter what area you're in. So let me start with a big one. I think it's important. I'll just, I'll give this away. One of the chapters in the book, I call it the ultimate social media sales hack. And obviously, again, in the context of selling books, but I think as people listen, they'll see how they could apply this to their own business. And one of the things that I did when I launched the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read was I went on Facebook and I found as many law of attraction themed groups as I could. And I just started dropping value bombs in the groups. And, we're talking like, just answering important questions, providing new manifesting methods, touching on topics that other law of attraction authors like never seem to want to touch on, just like delivering so much value. And, some of these groups will have 50,000 people, some of them will have 2,000 people, whatever it might be. Now, here I am dropping these value bombs, and I think anyone that's been in a Facebook group before and anyone that's tried to market or promote themselves in a Facebook group knows that you can't really promote yourself. You can't be like, hey, I've got a new book, or hey, I've got a business, or hey, check out this link. You just can't do it. It'll be frowned upon. You get kicked out of the group, and then your efforts for nothing. So my reasoning for all this is like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is going to take some of the best points from my book. I'm going to rephrase and repurpose them and turn them into these massively valuable posts. And the posts in and of themselves, without any mention of my book, without any mention of what I do, are going to be so good and so paradigm shifting and so intriguing and so high quality that people are going to be reading this post and it'll be like, who the hell is this guy? And then they're going to click on my profile, which I am in control of. They're going to click on my profile, and the first thing they're going to see in the banner is my book in bright graphics with all the little particulars, with the website to go there. They're going to scroll down and they're going to see that I've shared all these 5-star reviews from Amazon and Audible. They're going to see all these other things. They're going to know within 2 seconds of that profile loading up who I am, what I do, what I offer, all because I gave so much value up front that, by the way, I didn't have to come up with again. I had repurposed. I'd already came up with it in my book. They're like, who is this guy? They learn. And that really led to a lot of sales in the beginning. And that's a huge thing because those sales, one, helps keep the book a #1 bestseller. And two, those early, for me, there's times where like I'll also, I'll advertise like with Amazon advertising, even though I don't pay attention to the campaigns the way I should, meaning I spend more money than I should on those books. Those sales to me are still valuable because I like to think, and I've gotten this, this feedback before, the book is high quality enough that as long as I get one person reading it, they're going to recommend it to 2 or 3 more people. So even though I got that one sale on paper, I'm going to get 4 or 5 sales because one of those people recommend it. And then one of those people will tell this person who will interview me, and like all these, it's like a cascading web of value. So I know I went in a little bit of a word salad there, but this social media sales hack where you're just taking your best stuff anyway and repurposing it, it's magic. And the beauty of it is, if you're not getting a big response, that's also valuable feedback for you. Because like, if I'm not blowing people's socks off with this, maybe I've got to not just, maybe my content's good, but maybe the way I position the content needs work. Or maybe it's missing one little thing, or maybe it's not really shifting their paradigm, or maybe it's not enough of an original spin on the same old thing that they think they're used to. Remember, it's not what they're used to, it's what they think they're used to. Your job as a marketer for whatever you do, whether it's a product, a service, a book, or whatever, you have to subvert expectations and you have to pleasantly surprise people. Even if it's not brand new, it needs to be an original spin on something so that you're giving them an opportunity to view that problem or that challenge or whatever it might be with new eyes. Because when they view that thing through new eyes, they're not just viewing the problem in you, they're viewing themselves. Because all of a sudden, whatever challenge they want to solve, it becomes more possible now because you're not giving them the same old solution that they've already discarded in their mind.
Yeah, and it's almost like when you hang out with a new group of friends, right? So like, I love the saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like that was foundational for me as I was starting out as an entrepreneur. And when I went from working in an industry that I hated to working with people who were all marketers, entrepreneurs, people who had high values, people who were driven to create wealth, all of those things like changed my aspects instantly. And I suddenly was able to see that, okay, it's pretty easy to, replace income from a job. But it's actually very possible to create a lot of money, and it's not as hard as people make it out to be, because the people who I was hanging out with before were all employees. They're all confined by having a job or maybe getting an investment property here and there. And it's like, things compound a little bit slower when you're in that kind of scenario. Whereas when you start to hang out with people who are able to create money, create wealth, your whole paradigm just shifts like rapidly. And coming back to what you said before around the social media hack and creating value posts, like a lot of people they will go in there and they will give rags to riches stories, and they'll create like value, but they're actually not creating value. It's just a way of them trying to create a paradigm shift without actually giving anything. And I think that that's like an absolute mistake. And I'm sure you would agree with me, Andrew, as well. But from what I just heard from you is like actually going and giving away the secrets of your book for free, giving away the value, actually being helpful to people, answering questions. Like a lot of those things were absolutely foundational for you to initially get a lot of traction with your book and make a lot of sales in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to your point about like going in there and telling like a rags to riches story, I'd say, well, tell the story if you can include a lesson that the viewer will be able to apply. Because if you're just, and here, this is where I'll give another nugget from the book away. Let's talk about like titling your book. And again, this is specifically for the most part for nonfiction authors whose book, shows people how to do something, learn something, achieve something, or solve a problem or challenge in their lives. Thing about a book title is, you're an author, and whether it's your first book or your 50th, you need to admit to yourself that you care about how you look to your friends and family in the context of this book. You want this book to make you look cool, and therefore you want the book to look cool, and therefore you want the title to sound cool. But I'm here to tell you that, what's cool? Success. That's cool. So let's succeed instead. And for me, more important than a title that sounds cool is a title that sounds useful. And the way I make sure that a title sounds useful is I answer something. If a reader's looking for, a certain solution, how does the title of my book tell them through the title alone what's in it for them if they buy the book? Because, and by the way, I throw a little friendly shade at Andy Frisella in the book. And by the way, I've got nothing against Andy Frisella. And Andy Frisella, if people don't know, he's the author of 75 Hard. Really catchy title, really awesome. The reason I throw shade at him for that title, though, is the thing about Andy Frisella is he's got millions of followers. He's got a podcast, he's got clout, and he's got the marketing dollars to push that book. What if he's somebody without a business? And what if the book is actually his livelihood? And he puts something up called 75 Hard on Amazon. If you're looking for the solution that book provides, you're going to breeze past it because it didn't tell you what it does. Same with Gary Vaynerchuk. And what was the book title? It was 12 something. It was like 12 parts or 20. It was like his business book, but the words Gary Vaynerchuk is the thing that sold the book, not the actual title. And I'm here to tell people, like, if you don't have that clout, if you don't have those followers, your book title in and of itself needs to tell the reader what's in it for them if they buy. It needs to make it about them. It needs to intrigue them. It needs to pull them in. It needs to excite them. That's the value. And, I don't care if my family and friends think my book titles are stupid. All I care about is if a random reader who's searching for my solution is interested and intrigued and it notices enough to check out the book a little bit more closely and hopefully potentially buy it as well.
Yeah, and I would say that like your titles as well are pretty keyword rich. So like it would be quite beneficial for the Amazon search engines and things like that for someone to find your solution.
Yeah, well, isn't it funny? Because like, I have a law of attraction book and I put the words in that order, law of attraction book in the title. I think that helps me a little bit,
Well, I also want to sell 100,000 books.
Yeah, well, sell and books. I mean, and it's funny that you mentioned that. And again, this is where we're bouncing around a little. People that I invite them to check out the cover. And by the way, I have one of the bonuses in the book is like a 27-minute video where I go through all the drafts of the cover and I explain why I said no to certain things and why I said yes to certain things and the human psychology behind my decision-making process. And one thing people will notice if they look at the cover, 3 words I used has a different color background than to sell 100,000 books, because I want to make sure that there's a certain way that the eye is noticing these things. And I want to make sure that 100,000 books is really noticeable enough to be like, whoa, he sold 100,000 books. Let me click into this and look a little more deeply, because they don't care if it's 3 words I use. They don't care if it's 5 words, if it's 10 words. They don't care if it's 100 words I use. They care, and I would hope that they care. I know I care. So I sold 100,000 books with whatever those words were.
Yeah.
That's why I made sure that the cover highlights that in a certain way, that when you're going through Amazon, you're scrolling through publishing books and on how to sell books, you see that right away.
Yeah. And I think it's so impactful as well, considering how little most authors do sell of their own book as well. So it's an initial distinction saying like, okay, Andrew knows what he's talking about because he's got, the proofs in the pudding.
It's funny, Chris. I made the decision that I was going to write this, like, as the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read continued to rack up sales, people kept like wanting to get on phone calls with me for free and like get on my ideas. I'm like, well, I don't want to disappoint these people, but I don't have the bandwidth for this. So I'm like, I'm going to write a book and explain how, but if I'm going to write a book, I might as well make it worthwhile and make it something that's going to sell. When I was about I think 70,000 copies in for the last Law of Attraction book you'll need to read, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure 100,000's in the title. And I'm going to write it now and get things ready, but I have to wait until it actually passes 100,000 in order to do it. And it's like, I fell behind because it took me a little longer to write. But within a month of me announcing the 100,000 copies, all of a sudden I'm like, hey, want to know how I did this? And then like on Instagram, I'm like, doing little teasers. And then out of the blue, like, poof, here we got this new book. Go check it out.
Oh, it's so good. Rolling one win into another. It's so awesome.
Yeah. Like let the wins complement one another and let them support each other and leverage one for the other. It's like, as long as I'm being pushed in that direction and it kind of like it felt inspired to me, I'm like, all right, let me just run with this and let me get it out of my system so that like it isn't just hanging over my head, because I don't know how it is for some people, but for me, writing books is an exhaustive endeavor. And I wrote the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read in only 9.5 weeks. 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books, because I had to take breaks and really space things out. It took more like 7 months. So it was a much longer process for me.
How has the reception been so far for the new book?
Very good. It's interesting because I am not doing all the things that I say you're supposed to do for this book. So, the momentum is not as much as the first book, but the book is, it was a number 1 seller right out the gate. It's a number 1 new release right now. And the people that have read the book, I'm very grateful to say have loved it. Like people like, I had one person say like he had 55 versions of a book title that he was trying to decide on and he had no clarity. And he read my book and it's like, I got the clarity now.
Yeah.
Like it's helping people eliminate some of like the nonsense and the distractions and like the old programming of how you're supposed to do something. It's helping people push that out of the way and just get to the heart of the matter. So I'm very grateful and very excited to hear that like a lot of people dig it so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even argue like it's very easy, especially in marketing and sales world, to get hung up on hacks and things that you can do. But there's a lot of foundational things in the book and a lot of just simple things you can do consistently to help get the results that you want to get. And I think like, my mentor and I talk about reps, we call them reps. And it's basically, what are the things that I can do on a daily basis that are going to lead towards the outcomes that I want to achieve? For me right now, it's like building up my agency, getting more clients on board. Okay, so what are the inputs that I can do that can directly create the outputs that I want to achieve? And I think, the 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books, like in that book, there's so many of those like, okay, cool. What are the actual foundational things that you can do every single day to sell more books, right? Even some of the things around like creating YouTube channel. It's like, you can create a new video, you can create a new short every single day. Like that's absolutely manageable. You might not be able to edit it in the one day, but you can do the content for one day, you can do editing for another day. Like there's things that you can do every single day in each one of the, the different tactics in the book that are going to lead to the outcomes that you want to achieve.
I think people, they underestimate the power of YouTube and they underestimate the power of demonstrating your expertise. And by the way, I gave you the ultimate social media sales hack, and I gave you this little thing about the cover. Even these things are rooted in foundational human psychology, where when you're thinking of the person that you want to serve and help out in a certain way, and you're clear on that and that intent, this stuff becomes very easy. But like as an example with the YouTube, and let's do something where we're not even talking about books. I see, chiropractors, for example, They go on YouTube and they adjust their patients, on camera. And, I think in any reasonably populated area, any normals like in a city, you have at least 10 options for a chiropractor if you need to have your back adjusted. And yet these chiropractors have people not only coming from outside the state, but from outside the country just to see them because they saw them do the adjustment. They like the way they do it. Just the way, there are vocal coaches who are analyzing concert performances on YouTube, and then they're selling their services. I don't know if you could see the little guitar behind me. I'm learning guitar. And then, because of that, I'm looking up like videos on how to play guitar. And I found this dude who was showing you how to do November Rain solos by Slash from Guns N' Roses. And at the end of it, he sells the services. If you want to play like Slash, reach out to me. I'll give you lessons. Like, and by the way, his playing was so flawless. Like, first of all, I'm not, silly enough to believe that I'm going to play that well that soon. But at least I saw that he knew how to play it just the way Slash, meaning I knew I was going to get instruction from someone with that level of expertise and insight and understanding into how the guitar has to sound, how you have to move through the chords and the notes. Like, demonstrating your expertise, you will have people beating a path to your door, no matter what industry, what product, what service. YouTube is this wonderful opportunity to really get yourself out there and just show people why you're good. And one other example, like people, I remember this car dealership. He would get more customers by driving the cars with a camera on there and going nuts and how excited he is about the car and, hitting the gas and like all these things. And these are fun car reviews where I guarantee you people that are near his dealership, they're going to him rather than the other guy because they know him, they like him, they trust him. He's entertaining them. It's so funny. And here I'm getting off on a tangent and, apologies, Chris, I'm a word salad. It's very interesting in that, we have celebrity worship and, this celebrity's viewpoint on this XYZ thing, like, is it really valid? Do you really trust it? Do you really agree with it? Most people don't even stop and consider it, but because that person entertains them and that person gives them joy and they like that person, all of a sudden they're willing to buy into their opinion on something. They're putting Coke instead of Pepsi. They're putting, the Bisco instead of, whatever, they're pitching their products. They want to buy their products. They want to eat their food. They want to drink their soda because they know, like, and trust them. It's the same principle. It's the same concept. You're giving value. You're entertaining people. You're adding positivity to their life. Even if your stuff is depressing and dank, you're still entertaining them, which is adding something to their life. Therefore, they're going to go to you before they go to a random stranger.
Yeah, and I think it's the whole saying around document, don't create as well. And a lot of these people they're doing the adjustments anyway. They're driving the cars anyway. But rather than just doing it by themselves or with their patient, they've got a camera and they're taking the tiny little bit more effort to explain what they're doing. Sometimes even, sometimes they just do it and they don't even explain it. And people still love watching a crack get made on someone's neck and the reaction that the person makes when that happens. But they're not really putting in a whole range of new efforts. And I think that the same is true for going way back to the social media hack. It's like, you've already created the book. You're just repurposing. It's not like you're doing a whole heap of effort. You're just like taking some of the information you made already, and you're using it in a different avenue. And the same is true for anyone here who is listening that is already an author. You've got content for the next year because you've written a book already. You can create a video every single day on something new because you've already written the book. You've already done the hard work. So you can repurpose content on YouTube, on Facebook, on whatever platform you use, and you can keep going for ages without ever really running stale or running out of things to talk about.
Yeah. And one thing I mentioned in 3 words, I used to sell 100,000 books. You might remember, Chris, was part of what I like to do in just taking care of my reader and making sure they're good is I foster an environment where they're excited and they feel safe reaching out to me with a question or an issue or problem. That becomes content. And by the way, I don't give their name. I don't reveal personal details about them. I don't violate their privacy. But if they ask a random law of attraction question, I'll blur out whatever I need to blur out. I'll make a YouTube video about it because I'm like, well, 5 people are coming to me with this. I can either keep typing the same response or I can make a video and make fresh content and monetize it. And now I've got YouTube paying me to promote my own book, but by serving an audience who may or may or not have already bought the book. And it's like it all comes together that easily.
Oh, dude, I love that. Well, I think that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much for giving so much value away. And it's it's very in tune with Andrew's character, by the way, if you read either of his books. Andrew, is there anywhere that we can send someone to, give them the best value after this episode, resources potentially?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I invite people to check out the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, or 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books, on Amazon or Audible. And if you go to awesomemarvelous.com, that'll take you to at least the American listings, but you can just check your local regional Amazon or Audible if you want to. But also, if you want a demonstration or an example of like how I'm doing this, my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Andrew Kap. So you can just watch what I do and how I'm giving value to my audience as a way of promoting my book, but also just promoting the YouTube channel. So any of those ways would be good. And thank you for asking, Chris. And also thank you for having me. Really enjoyed our conversation. I could tell by the way, you're framing these questions, you've got this wonderful mind for pulling out the value for the content for your audience. So I appreciated getting that pulled out of me so I could offer a little bit more for you guys.
Thank you for the compliment. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Damn, what an awesome episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so you get notified every single time a new episode releases. And if you're struggling with your book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit of your book sales to see where we can help you bridge the gap between not many sales to a lot of sales. It's a free resource call that we have together where I give you some clear action steps that you can take to take your stuff from broken to selling. I'll see you over there. Thanks again for listening.